Good morning, everyone. This morning is Coffee and Conversation. Thank you for being with us this morning. And I'm super, super stoked about our speaker, Christie Garcia. We've known each other for, I want to say probably at least 6 or 7 years, at least.
At least, yeah.
Yeah. And Christie just recently ran our staff, our team, as well as the founders and co-founders of the startups in our program, in the incubator program here at the Cal Poly CIE. It was a phenomenal program, 12-week program. Leadership coach doesn't do it justice because Christie is so much more than that. It's a real mind shift in the way you approach your interactions, your relationships, your communication styles, the way she helps you rewire your brain to improve the communication, team building, make sure that everyone functions at the as their best self. But Christy, I'll let you talk more about that. Obviously, it's your specialty, but we've had I can't say this enough. It was a really wonderful experience, life-changing in many ways, in all sorts of relationships, just not just with your coworkers, but also with anyone in your life, really, any other human in your life. So great to have you, Christy. Looking forward to jumping back into some content. So we're the SBDC. We're a national program funded by the SBA. There are about 1,000 SBDCs throughout the US. We serve San Luis Obispo County. If you're a business owner and you'd like any type of assistance in coaching, consulting for anything that has to do with your business, be it just starting out, just launching from scratch, be it improving your sales, your marketing, launching a brand new product, and even things like software development needs, prototyping, whatever need you might have, we can help you. We obviously have also a lot of workshops and training events such as this one, such as Coffee and Conversation. So join us, sign up with us. It's free to any business owner in the county. We're funded by the SBA, so no cost to you. Next slide, we have we want to thank our sponsors, and we'll show you a very brief video. We're sponsored by the SBA, by GoBiz, and by Maynard Cooper. So we'll watch this short video and then launch into the program. Christy, are you getting the audio on this?
No, I'm not.
Okay. If the audio is not working,
hi everyone. My name is Kamal and I'm a partner with Maynard Cooper and Gale in the firm's San Francisco office. Maynard Cooper is a full-service law firm of national reach with over 300 lawyers across 11 offices coast to coast. Our San Francisco practice focuses on advising emerging growth companies and venture capital firms, including with respect to equity management, financings, employment, and intellectual property matters. We are extremely proud to be a Founder Circle sponsor amongst an extraordinary circle of other dedicated philanthropists who recognize the immense value that Cal Poly's Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship bring to the SLO community. We hope that each of you enjoys this upcoming training and workshop and are able to incorporate the knowledge and know-how that will be presented shortly to further help grow, develop, and accelerate your businesses.
Thank you to Maynard Cooper, our sponsor. So Christy, I will let you jump right in. Feel free to ask us questions in the Q&A box, and I'll let you take it away. Thanks, Christy.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. This is such a pleasure. I will give a quick shout out to the SBDC. If you are a business owner and you are not using their services yet, highly recommend them. I, during 2020, started working with them on a few resources that I just were out of my wheelhouse, and they were incredible. So shout out to all of you guys over there and the services you're offering, and it really is helpful. Well, hello, I am Christie Garcia with Mindful Choice. I am so excited to just share my story. Judy and her team invited me to just come and offer some of my story and how I became an entrepreneur. So Judy, were you going to facilitate the questions, or do I kind of wing it with you?
Oh yeah, no. I will facilitate for the next 15, 20 minutes, and then Madison will jump in.
Perfect.
Oh, so Christy, so before we jump in, what I was hoping you would give us more background information on how you started Mindful Choice. Just tell us your story.
Great.
I think that'll be a great start. Yeah.
Sorry, I was like looking at deer in the headlights, like, I don't know what to say.
Sorry. Sorry about that.
Live sessions, here we go. So good morning to everyone. I am so honored to have you all on here to hear my story. I actually started my business about 10 years ago. And prior to that, I was in the medical sales industry. I had traveled all over the world doing many different things. I was living a great life. And I think that's really how my business got started. You know, it's funny that our journey always leads us somewhere. And sometimes you don't know at that time where it's going to take you. But throughout my 20s, and even early 30s, you know, I had this really great job to where I was able to live in 8 different cities, been able to travel abroad for 4 weeks at a time, had tons of vacation, had really everything that I thought I wanted. And I think through that experience, you know, as I started to grow in my career, I was doing a lot of trainings in the hospitals, and I had the pleasure of being able to walk the floors for many hours, for many years. And I met a lot of people. One of my favorite things to do when I was killing time was to go in and talk to patients who were alone. You know, one of the things, watching people ill in a hospital alone, coming from a big family, I'm a small town country girl, so family was really a high priority for me. And to see people in a hospital by themselves really was something new for me. It was heartbreaking and I didn't quite understand it. And so I would just go in and have random conversations or eat my sandwich when someone was in a room by themselves and kind of learn their story. What was, you know, how did they end up there? Why don't they have family there? And one of the most consistent things I heard was, I worked too hard and I didn't prioritize the things that mattered most, or I worked so much to provide for my family. And when I retired, my relationship suffered. And so they weren't there when I was done. And that really hit home for me for many different reasons. At the time, I was debating if I was going to get into a leadership role within sales. I really didn't want to. My drive was to start my own business of some sort. And at that time, it kind of just dawned on me like, wow, there's something here. And so I started to look into training leaders. And at the time, I wasn't really sure even what that meant. I just was watching so many peers get promoted, you know, really great, successful sales reps get promoted into these positions. And for the next 2 or 3 years, they just failed. And I didn't really know why. And I don't mean failed that they, you know, didn't keep their job and they couldn't, you know, make things sustainable, but they had usually high turnover or a lot of conflict. They struggled to inspire their team. They struggled to get people to the finish line with them. And I got really curious, why is that? And one of the reasons I realized is the ego. You know, one of the things that we all do our entire life, we're praised on, I win. If I get a good grade, I get an A. If I make a basket, everybody cheers for me. If I do X, I get rewarded. And that is something that is programmed into our culture. And so now when you turn into a leader, a boss, a spouse, a business owner, a friend, a parent, it's no longer about you. It's now about the we. And if you don't shift gears, then it does take trial and error, which is why they always say wisdom comes with age. Well, I wanted to kind of shorten that trial period. And I started to learn about my own ego. Unfortunately, it wasn't as obvious as I might make it sound. It took a very big fall. I was 30. Actually, November 19th is the anniversary of my fall 11 years ago. And it was just one morning, Friday. I was walking out, getting ready for a holiday party that evening. Had my dog taken for a typical walk. It was raining outside. And that morning changed everything. You know, it's one of those things where life is so precious and you don't know what's going to happen. And every single one of us is blessed to be here for one more day, one more minute, one more hour, whatever it is. And that was so apparent that morning. After I was walking my dog, I locked myself out of my apartment, which happened all the time. And we did foolish things when we were young and dumb. And so we used to just crawl through the fire escape down our wall that would go into our kitchen window. And so I was going to do that morning. And the only thing that shifted was instead of going to the roof and crawling down, I actually went through my neighbor's window. We shared a fire escape rail. And so she's like, well, since you have the dog, just put the dog in here and let's go through my bedroom window instead of going through the roof since it's raining. I'm like, great. So she's in front of me, she's going to hold some Christmas trees. And all of a sudden I fall through the 2x2 manhole of this 3-story building. So it was a 30-foot fall, and I miraculously made it through that fall. And that was that life-changing moment where I realized something needed to change. At the time, I didn't quite know what that meant, but once I actually came to, and after the shock passed and I got through Thanksgiving, I finally realized what an ego is. And the ego for me is the controller, protector ego. So I don't have any emotional attachment to anything. I was able to shut it off and act like everything's fine. I was great. I was annoyed that I had to slow down. I was annoyed that I was in the emergency room for 5 hours after my fall. And I told the ambulance driver, hey, I've got to be back by noon because I've got a party tonight. Absolutely insane mindset when you just have a 30-foot fall. But at the time it seemed normal. Well, come December 5th, I had one of the most expensive cries of my life. I was talking to my coach, and all of a sudden I just hysterically started crying for about 15 minutes. I didn't know what it was. It freaked me out, actually. I thought I needed to check myself into some psych ward. And come to find out, that's how I have been bottling up emotion for most of my adult life. What that taught me was that if we don't stop and slow down and check in with our ego, those unconscious behaviors just make our decisions. And I was happy. I was doing everything I thought I wanted to be doing. I had a great job. I had awesome friends. I traveled the world. I lived in this amazing apartment that overlooked the Golden Gate Bridge. Life was good until you actually stop and you realize I'm 30 years old and this isn't really the end all be all. And that's what shifted everything and really started to build mindful choice. I had been talking about building mindful choice for a couple of years, and I just kept, oh, I just gonna get the next bonus check. Oh, I just got one more commission check. I just closed this big deal. And it became the excuses. So that year changed, and I started to say, okay, this is the year. I need to make space to start dating, and I want to have a family one day, because otherwise I'm going to end up like one of these older people that are in the hospital that has all the money in the world. She's traveled all these things. She's got all these great stories, but there's no one going to be there on my 90th birthday to celebrate it with, which means I'm at the finish line by myself. And that was probably the biggest fear of my entire being. And I was sabotaging my life, creating that to happen by not stopping and slowing down and saying, what do I really want? How do I intentionally build my life to make sure I'm successful in my business and in my life? And that's really what had designed the Mindful Choice Leadership Academy, to help more leaders balance. Because what I realized that day is it's not just men. At the time, it was a lot of men sitting in the hospital by themselves. It's now women too. We are just as prone to being by ourselves because we are workaholics too. We are focused on our career too. We are task oriented too. And if we don't stop and prioritize the people, they are not guaranteed to be here tomorrow. And so that's really how it all got started. It was a long roundabout way to get me here.
No, this is great.
Things needed to change.
Thank you, Christie. No, it's such a meaningful story. And it's I think most successful entrepreneurs who launch into their businesses, they have that type of story, right? There's something that there was a trigger somewhere. Can we jump into some of the content that you've shared with us a little bit and give everyone a bit of an overview? So you talked about these egos. There's 3 main egos. Can you give us a little description of the 3 and see if that triggers any questions on how people might be able to relate to those as the initial connection with what you're trying to share?
Absolutely. So the 3 egos, I know most of your listeners are probably like, oh, I don't have an ego, or, oh, I know someone that does, they need this work. Well, the reality is that everybody has an ego. How I use the term ego, it's not the loud, arrogant person in the room. It is actually the unconscious brain. So the ego can be quiet and passive. It can be loud and arrogant. It can be neutral, completely emotionless. And so the trick is figuring out what are your unconscious behaviors and how are they holding you back from being your best self, from connecting and creating meaningful relationships, from leading with intention and making sure that your actions are aligning with your impact. And so that's really how I use the ego. One other thing to preface the egos, it's both your strengths and your weakness. So I believe that every strength overuse becomes our weakness. And so really figuring out, where are you using your strengths at a maximum, and when do you start to overuse them? When we overuse them, it becomes the I must win, I must be right, I must be liked, and it's I-centric, which is where that old term ego idea comes from. When we use it at a maximum, we actually use all three. We all must win, we all must be liked, we all must be right. And when we can use that model, now we start to lead from a place of intention and consciousness. And so that's the ultimate goal of the program. With the ego, so there's three of them. Like you said, there's one, the complier. The complier is your warm, caring, kind, loving people. Naturally, by nature, they want to take care of others. They're high on the empathy scale. They've got strong need to take care of people and to make sure everybody comes along for the ride. They also are the ones that can walk into a room and they leave with friends, walk into a room of strangers and leave with a group of friends, because they're just, they have that warm, trustworthy feeling to them. The other, then you've got the protector. The protector is they're black and white thinkers, but they're high on integrity. They're trustworthy. They're all about fairness. They take care of the greater good, community concern, and really looking out for the best interest of everyone. And then you've got your controllers. They're fast thinkers. They're results first, get to the finish line. These are your very ambitious, usually climb the ladder. If you're a leader in any format, you've got controller in you, because it's just a must-have to get to that next level. Now, I'm not saying you're using it at your maximum strength, but we all have a little bit of controller if we are in some form of a leadership role, because it is where ambition, passion, drive, excitement comes from. Now, as you can see, if you have all three of those are the strengths of all three. Now you become a warm, caring leader who gets results and makes sure everyone is at the finish line with you. And so that's really where that balanced ego comes from. When we overuse it, the complier tends to be passive. They go along to get along. They tell people what they want to hear. It's really hard to make decisions or hold people accountable to give feedback, because you don't want to hurt people's feelings. Protectors tend to, when they are overused, they tend to be stubborn. They're so high in integrity and they hold their values, but that can make them very stubborn. It can make them very, come across as aggressive or passive as well. They typically are either the quiet guy and gal that sits in the room, but they can have a very stern look on their face if they're not happy. Or they are the person that when they speak, the wisdom comes out and everybody listens. So it's that black and white extreme. Or they can be the loud, aggressive person that feels like they're always challenging your ideas. They are confrontational. So knowing that the protector can be both extremes depending on what their sub-ego is. But with the protector, they love deeply, they care deeply. Unfortunately, emotion is really hard to process. So they tend to protect their heart, which makes them, instead of being sad, they get mad. Instead of being able to open their heart up and let people in, they typically distance themselves and put up a barrier. And so knowing where those boundaries are serving you and where they're holding you back is really important for a protector. For controllers. Controllers are, again, very high energy, lots of great things, but they're overly competitive. And so what happens is everybody becomes competition. It's never good enough. The perfectionist overdrives. You're always chasing a ghost to prove that you're supposed to be there, which makes it really hard to actually collaborate and team play. A lot of times a controller thinks they're doing all these things, but unfortunately, usually if you were to assess the people behind you, they'll say, well, actually, no, you're micromanaged, and you end up being more aggressive, and your ideas are the only way we have to go along with it, or we are, ran over by the train. And so knowing, when are you actually team building? When are you micromanaging? When are you actually collaborating? When are you dictating on what people are supposed to be doing? One thing as a controller myself, controllers over control when we feel out of control. And so recognizing, when are we trying to hold on to a really tight grip, and when do we just need to loosen that grip and trust the process? It's one of the hardest things for controllers to learn. So those are the three controllers. Again, we all use them. We all know someone with them. And the sooner you learn about your egos, the easier it is to have these really productive conversations.
I know, super interesting. I have luckily already gotten the privilege of hearing this, going through Mindful Choice, but how would you say, I know you explained kind of your methods for determining the different, ego types, but how would you say that it's different than any other leadership academy? How is it applicable in the workplace? And how necessarily does that, I mean, I know from personal experience, it's a very awesome program, but what exactly is it that allows it to be more successful than other just kind of more generic leadership programs?
So that's a great question. I think there's a lot of really great programs out there, whether you're talking leadership, whether you're talking, I even compare it to going to the gym and having a really great physical trainer. All those programs are really great. What the problem is with most of those programs is that if you don't understand your ego, most of the time we can't change it. And that's really the biggest difference between this program and others. Most programs tell you what you do and how to fix it. This program tells you not just what you do, it tells you why you do it. And you become very self-aware, not of, what's the motivator? What are the belief systems? What are the behaviors that you're not aware of? Those unconscious things that hold us back from sticking with a, training program, sticking with new skills that we learn. How many people have been to a leadership program or some form of, retreat, and they all come home, we're super excited, we got all this new stuff, and we're gonna, we took all these notes and we're ready to apply it to our team. And then you get back into the grind, and 3 or 4 days later, a week later, you forgot everything you learned, and it's now just a binder in the back of the room. That is what happens with most programs. This program, I always say, if you do this program, you're going to apply all those new things that you've learned over the last 10 years, because now you know why you weren't applying them. And so that is the deep psyche that goes into this. I have a new client that just started last week, and her feedback yesterday after just the first week was, wow, this really does apply such simple concepts, but I now can actually see them in real time to then be able to apply the tool. And that's the difference: self-awareness and ownership. If you have self-awareness and ownership, you get to be your best self, because now you're aware of when your worst self shows up. Most of us, 95% of the time, are going through the motions unconsciously every single day. And it drives our conversations, it drives our actions, or I should say reactions, and it drives the emotion that shows up. So stress, overwhelm, change, all the things that our world is going through right now, that is ego-driven energy. And so the more you can be aware of how you are showing up and why you're showing up that way, now that final component that you learned from those other programs of what to do, now you have new tools to actually apply a new approach that you can easily keep going, because it's now intentional and conscious behaviors versus that unconscious reaction behavior.
That's great. So I know that you'd mentioned some feedback. What would you consider to be kind of your first win that made you feel confident you were doing the right thing, starting this new entrepreneurial journey?
Well, the very first win I would say was before I even started my business. I was sitting in a room of, I think there was 10 or 12 orthopedic surgeons. They were all male. I'm in there and I'm doing a presentation, and one of the surgeons, fired off. And in my head, it was just this arrogant man comment. And he challenged me and he tried to belittle me in front of all these people. Well, I just fired back, and my ego responded to his. And in real time, I had just learned about this, and I had just learned that I can be a jerk, and I had learned that I can also be very arrogant. And so I just literally started laughing in the middle of this room with 12 orthopedic surgeons. And I just was like, oh my gosh, I just did it. I was a jerk right now. He's allowed to be a jerk, but I responded to his jerk, which makes me a jerk. And so I just started laughing. I'm like, well, I'm going to actually rewind and take all that back and apologize for my really poor decision of how to respond to you. I want to thank you for your feedback. And it was just one of those moments where I'm like, this can work. This can actually work in real time. And if people can recognize, and instead of getting embarrassed or, justifying my poor behavior, well, he was a jerk, so I was a jerk, because that's what the ego does all the time. If we could all just take ownership in real time, laugh it off, say sorry, and move on. Think about how simple our world would be. And so that's really one of the biggest wins I had. That was probably 2 months before I quit my job and started going full-time and building this program, because it was just so mind-blowing to watch the response. It changed the energy of the entire room. I became real, and everybody else dropped their egos and they became real too. And it was just this moment of, wow, this is what a room of best selves look like. And I want to create more of this. I want to bring humans back to the business and really create that in real time for many different teams. And honestly, the first organization I worked with, you just see it. You see it quickly. It's not something that takes a lot of time. It just takes, I always say 2 to 3 weeks. If you go through this work 2 to 3 weeks with your team members, you are going to see a shift because now you have ownership. Everybody gets to own their jerk. Instead of someone else complaining about someone else's jerk, they now know that they were a jerk too. And the one complaining about a jerk probably was a jerk too. And so knowing where was my part? What was my part? How can I change my side of this? And how can they change theirs? And not being responsible for everyone else's impact, just be responsible for your own. My favorite quote is, you can't change others, but you can change your own approach. If you learn to change your own approach, you can actually change how others show up. And that's ego management at its finest.
That's great. So it sounds like a lot of it is kind of centered around authenticity and bringing back authenticity into the workplace. Do you find that there's any resistance to that, in the kind of business culture where it's supposed to be just pretty all the time? Do you find that authenticity is sometimes met with some resistance?
I don't think it's the idea of authenticity that's met with resistance. I think it's fear of vulnerability. Vulnerability is scary. Our truth is scary. Us showing up as our real self and taking our mask off, it's scary. I think once people start to do the work, it's not quite as scary. I think it's getting to the first workshop, watching the first couple videos, doing the first couple activities, because that's where ownership starts. That's where self-awareness starts. And you start to realize like, wow, I'm not always nice. If you're capable of being kind, you're capable of being mean. If you're capable of being honest, you're capable of being too direct. If you're capable of being caring and, empathetic, you're capable of being mean and inconsiderate. It's just part of the nature. There is a black to every bright light. So what is your ugly? That's, module 1 of the program is really about owning your good, bad, and ugly. How do you show up? And so that's usually when people struggle. Where I love this work is once though, it's so hard to go back because now you know. And when you realize that, wow, my impact's not what I thought it was, and you start to see the gaps of your self-awareness of how you think you show up versus how you actually show up, who doesn't want to live there? So it doesn't take a long time to shift people from that fear place to step into the work, but there is always a little resistance in the beginning because it is scary.
Yeah, I know. Definitely. That was a fun activity.
Yeah. You had the experience. What was your experience with that?
It, honestly, kind of surprised me. You're just so good at lying to yourself. I feel like, at least me personally, there are some areas where you have blind spots. And I know one of the activities where we sent a survey out to people, in our circle to ask, oh, how am I showing up in these different ways? And reading those responses, like, that's very accurate, but it's
right?
having it right in front of your face and really, like you mentioned, confronting that and, coming face to face with it is really how you start, how you can build your foundation to grow from. So it's difficult, but it's, like you said, it's very good to be able to face that.
Absolutely. What I love that you acknowledged is when you get the feedback, it stings, it hurts, right? Mm-hmm. What I love about this platform though, is it creates that space where you're not caught off guard. Even if you are, you're still, you're going to get feedback right now. In real time, how the ego responds, because it does lie to us. We do have those beliefs, and depending on which ego you have, it likes to blame, judge, accuse others. It likes to buy its own press. So it says, no, you're doing a great job. It's them that sucks today. And so, it tells you that all day, every day for your whole life. And now all of a sudden you get to see in black and white on paper what some of these flaws are. And in real time, it just stings. It hurts. And it usually triggers us to get upset, to get our feelings hurt, to get angry, and to start making all these excuses of why we do what we do. When you're reading it in real time, it kind of just pokes a nerve like, whoa, that is accurate. And then it starts to make you think the rest of the world knows I do that, because our ego tells us no one sees our ugly side. No one knows my worst self, where really the whole world knows your worst self because you're doing it externally every day. You're the only one not owning it. And so it kind of bridges that gap to be able to say, okay, now that I'm aware of it, I can see it in real time too. And it's so empowering to be able to then choose your action when you start to do that thing that you don't really like what you do.
Yeah, definitely. I think empowering is the perfect word for it, because it allows you to kind of take control of every part of yourself, not just the parts that you're necessarily proud of, also the parts that you're not proud of, because that's, where the work starts. So,
yep.
That's awesome. I know that there is a lot of room for personal growth within the program and, overcoming your own personal challenges. What are some challenges that you faced business-wise with this venture, and how did you overcome them?
So many. I think anybody who's running a business knows the challenges that come with it, whether it's getting up and going and building your brand, whether it's, selling your product and believing in it and getting people to actually buy it, or whether it's expanding and growing a team and trying to get people to believe in something and be aligned around the vision just as much as you are. Those are all very common. And for me, I think my biggest struggles have been finding the right partners as far as to help build the brand, especially in this next phase where I'm growing and expanding, getting, more virtual and finding the key people to really support me. And then the fear. I have to do this work too. The fear of failing, the fear of not doing it right. How it makes me show up is I procrastinate. I put things off. I do the things that are easier. I justify why I haven't moved forward yet, and you make all these excuses. And so I think really having a coach on my team has been the most important and most valuable thing I've done since I started this business. Luckily, I learned about coaching before I even started my business, but I can say that's the only reason I'm here. Having someone who's helped on those days when I'm doubting myself or I'm going into my own ego-centric, actions and energy and reacting to things and trying to over control because I'm stressed out and there's not enough money coming in, or trying to over control because I haven't met a deadline or I haven't got enough clients, or trying to, whatever it is, having someone ground me and say, what can you control right now? What's the main focus right now? And help me reprioritize my task list so that I can stay in that productive action. That's been huge for me. Over the last year and a half through all the pandemic stuff, really staying attached to the bigger vision and not getting sidetracked by all the fire drills that come up in today's world. There's so many of them. Actually, I was listening to a presentation the other day, and they were talking about the reactive energy. And, we are so much more reactive than we used to be, that the fire drill amount, how many fire drills a day have pretty much tripled since the 90s. And it's crazy because we're just all on. We're all supposed to know the right answer. We're all supposed to be able to move, quickly and get things done tomorrow or yesterday. And now it's like, okay, we got to slow down a little bit. We got to slow down and get more productive. And I think being able to understand the ego's energy around these fire drills has helped me tremendously to really keep the priorities real priorities instead of just making everything a priority.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of the pandemic, 2020, I know that's been a huge stressor for everyone.
Really
have you found that more people have been attracted to your program because, we have been, forced to be locked in with ourselves and kind of, start recognizing those behaviors? Have you noticed kind of a difference in how people are processing the material?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know if it's necessarily how they're processing the material, but how they're finding the material. Yes. I think there's different conversations happening in the world. People slowed down. One thing the pandemic did was slow people down. I think we're now going even faster than we were before. We got to remember that slowdown was actually good for all of us. And so, I think during that slowdown, people did become more intentional. They did remember what the real priorities in life are. And so a lot of people have been realigning and, rebuilding how they're showing up every day. So I think it has brought people to this work. I think as far as organizations go, you know, there's been so much division and so much controversy and so many hot topics that have surfaced in the last 18 to 24 months that I think it's really forced organizations to remember the human side of their business, to prioritize some of this kind of work, not just the competencies. A lot of organizations do leadership development, but it's competency based. It's all skill based. And so really getting to the psyche and the soft skills that keep people loyal, that keep people engaged, that keep people wanting to work for the organization and the bigger cause, because there's a bigger purpose there when you start bringing the people back to the business. And I think working virtually right now, it's really important to get these deeper conversations surfaced to just re-engage people in a new way. It's important for loyalty, you know, the great resignation, that's like a real thing. And people are saying that one thing that keeps 80% of people happy in their job is training and development, and not just competency training and development, but personal, something that helps them outside of work too. That is what people want right now. And this work does that.
Yeah, that's awesome. We do have a question in the chat from Gina. She said, I've been on my journey of acknowledging my ego and the stories it believes in to protect me. When you become aware of these stories more and more, deep healing is possible. To me, it's not about using the ego as much as absolving it. With this comes true healing, which does allow us to be authentic. All this comes from awareness. What kinds of steps do you teach that help people with this awareness? Have you seen people come through deep revelations that make them move forward with new perspectives?
Hi, Gina. Yes, such a great question and story. You know, congratulations on your own journey. I think this work is so incredibly powerful. It does have deep, deep, deep revelations that change and transform our lives. You know, this work isn't just about giving new skills. It truly is changing people's direction and journey for the long haul. So congrats on doing that work. Through the Leadership Academy, yes, it is a 20-week course that the first part of it is self-awareness. Second part is, you know, so how do I show up in the world? Second part is, how do I impact the people around me? And then the third part is all the tools and resources to really apply them in real time. So easy ways to do that. You know, if you're already starting to learn the self-awareness, you know, what do you do with that information? That's probably one of the most common things I get in the early part of the program is, well, now I know I do that. What do I do now? Because in reality, if we don't know a new way, then we're just going to keep doing what we do. And so asking your best self in that conscious moment, you're going to choose a new way just if you're conscious. So being able to say, okay, let's say, for example, you're one that kind of gets your button pushed really easily. So if someone disagrees with you or challenges you, you just get really irritated and you get annoyed and you kind of fire off and you start to dictate. If that's your energy, being able to just stop yourself in that moment and get curious. And this goes for anybody who has an ego reaction, to breathe, take a moment and say, okay, why am I responding like this? What is the deeper reason why? Most of us, again, process emotion to where we think we're mad, we're happy, we're sad, we're mad, happy, sad, or frustrated. And we very rarely can break those terms down. Usually when we're mad, it's more of a disappointment. It's usually upset because someone hurt our feelings or stepped on a value. We usually feel disrespected. There's a bigger thing that's making us mad. And so when we can identify the real emotion, now we can have a different conversation, and you can start to have productive conversations to say, okay, why does this matter to me? Why does this matter to the people in the room? Why does this matter to the community? Why does this matter to my customers, to my family? And the further away from it you get, the more clear and less emotional your reaction is going to be. And that's when you can actually start to change and shift from that self-awareness component to say, okay, something needs to change here. What is the bigger impact I want to create? Knowing the impact that you want to build in the world. How do you want to be remembered, Gina? You know, what are those 3 words? Making sure every thought, action, and behavior is going to be aligned around those 3 words. Now you can choose. And if you are conscious enough to choose your next action, I guarantee you're going to naturally be your best self more so than you were if you were unconsciously choosing. Does that make sense?
No reply from Gina yet, but thank you for that. Oh, she said, thank you. There we are. So what words of wisdom would you have to any other small business owners or people who are, starting out on their entrepreneurial journey and they're wanting to take that leap of faith, but they're not quite sure how to, or, how to get started?
Yep. I think the biggest thing is don't let your ego talk you out of doing self-development work, professional development work. I think that's the most common thing that happens when we are busy. We justify why we don't have time, or I'll do it next, month or next year. The reality is people are never going to be a priority to the ego. So unless you just make the choice to change something and to enroll yourself or to hire yourself a coach, it's never going to change. So I encourage you to just do it. Do something. Whether you sign up for the Leadership Academy, or you find yourself a coach, or you find a program that you've always wanted to enroll in, just make sure it involves self-awareness, ownership, and ego management of some sort. When you start to put those three things together, I promise your business will be more successful. You'll start to move faster. I have an entrepreneur who came to me actually January of this year. She was paralyzed with fear. She had this dream. She wanted to get started. She wanted to build it out, and she just couldn't get herself to move. And so within 3 weeks of us working together, she found herself a place to start her business. So she started renting a property. She started remodeling it. Within 4.5 months of us working together, she was able to open her shop. She's now 6 months in and she's thriving. So it's just a matter of identifying the fears, working through them, and then having that cheerleader to help you along the way, because it's going to be hard to get you to move when we get into that paralysis. That's the ego's job, is keep you where you're at, sabotage your good intentions, sabotage your success, because it doesn't want you happy. If you're happy, you don't need it. And that's ultimately, this work is going to help make you happier, more successful in every avenue of your life, especially in business, especially at home.
Yeah, definitely. We had in the chat, Kiki said, congrats, love seeing those transformations. Definitely. I know that,
Thanks, Kiki.
mindful choice is great for transforming, how you react in the workplace, but also, as you mentioned, it does apply to your personal life as well. So how would you say the, different ego types and learning about them can be applied to not only your work, but also your personal life?
That was one of the big things for me for work, is how do you bring humans back to business? And I didn't realize how much this was going to transform people's lives at home as well. And that is one of my favorite side benefits that come with this, is at the end of the day, everybody has ego. Starting at age 2, your kids have an ego. So the more you learn about your own ego, the more you learn about everybody else's ego, which means you get to come home and you get to recognize, when are you tired and your family's getting your worst self? When are you, so stressed out and overwhelmed at work that you can't turn your computer off, or you're working into the late hours of night, or, you're on the couch watching a movie with your family, but you've got your laptop. All these things are ego driven. You can't shut off. You can't put those people first. And so what I love the most about this work is people, especially business owners, who just struggle to shut. I shouldn't say business owners, managers, leaders. The higher up we get in roles, the harder it is for us to shut off and to create that balance. And this work teaches you how to do that. I had a group of directors that all of them, one of their goals was to stop working at home. And within probably 3 or 4 weeks into the program, they kind of all started to hold themselves accountable a little bit more, to where they left their laptops at home. And by the end of the program, I would say majority of them were not opening laptops on the weekends, or during the week. They were having dinner with their families, and they just decided to be present. If they're going to show up for work 100%, they're going to show up for their family 100%. And they just started to shift that belief system that I have to do this all the time, otherwise I won't be successful. My competitors are working all the time, so I have to too. Those are stories that the ego creates. And so being able to be an intentional parent, being an intentional spouse, recognizing when your worst self shows up at home is just as important as recognizing when it shows up at work. Unfortunately, our family typically gets our worst self more than our employees do. And so being able to take a step back And at work, you get to show up and make your employees and your customers your number one priority. And then when you get home, your family and your kids become your number one customer and number one priority. And that belief system can shift everything like that when you look at it in real task versus just, I don't have time for that, I'm busy. I have to miss this, soccer game because I have a meeting, or I have to, can't plan the birthday party because there's just too much going on, or I've got this. And we justify why people get pushed to the back burner all the time. And so managing the ego is so valuable for your home life. Guarantees that you're going to have family on your 90th birthday, which was my ultimate goal when I started this business.
Yeah, I love that, being able to kind of recognize how it applies not only to work, but to your life, and also not just how it's applying to your day to day, but also one of my favorite things to take away from the program going through it was when you had us picture, what are you going to be doing on your 90th birthday? Who's around you? And it's, something that you can long-term apply to your personal and work life. And I think that that's what really gives a lot of value to these lessons. It's not only applicable minute to minute, it's long-term. So yeah,
absolutely. It's building a more intentional life altogether.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, awesome. I know we have to wrap up here pretty soon. So thank you so much. Was there anything else you wanted to share with us, Christie, or thank you. You've given us so much, valuable insight to consider today.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Madison. It has been a real pleasure. I appreciate everybody showing up this morning and listening to my story. If you'd like to learn about your ego, if you are interested in getting some resources, you want to talk about the Academy, please reach out. I'd love to get on a call and visit with you. You can find me at mindfulchoiceacademy.com, or you can get me on LinkedIn, Facebook, or Instagram as well. So again, mindfulchoiceacademy.com, or you can find me on LinkedIn at Christie Garcia or Mindful Choice.
Thank you so much, Christie. Also, just a reminder to all attendees, the full recording is going to be shared with everyone. So if you wanted to rewatch, revisit any points, I know that, Christie shared a lot of really valuable information with us today. So we will be sending that out shortly after we're done here. And then next up, we have some upcoming events. Number one is AngelCon applications are live. So if you know anybody who is interested in gaining $100,000 to grow your startup, there is the link. We'll also send that out in the follow-up email. Super, super fun event, really cool. We've got a great team of investors this year, and we're really, really excited to see what sort of ideas, get to come in and compete and, see all of the great innovation that can be presented there. And then we do also have last year's AngelCon for anyone who's interested on demand. Feel free to watch that. Like I said, a lot of really cool startup ideas, really interesting to always see what sort of entrepreneurial innovations are brought to the Central Coast. So that is about it. As I mentioned, we will be sending this out. Feel free to reach out to us, reach out to Christie with any other questions. But other than that, have a wonderful day, everyone. Thank you so much again, Christie, for joining us.
Thank you, Madison. Have a great day.
Thanks. Bye-bye.